talk about the Ravens offseason and more. USA Today Ravens Wire. He is Kevin Oestreicher. Kevin, what's up?
What's going on, guys? Yeah, as we continue to await the coaching staff and Jesse Minter's press conference, at least the Ravens have their guy, but now they're going to have to figure out a way to get a lot more of their guys in the building, as the coaching staff going to look pretty different next year.
Now, as we look at possible offensive coordinator candidates, any idea, Kevin, in what Jesse Minter would hope for? Or what? Let's just look at what we know with the Ravens personnel, what he would need to get the most out of a Ravens offense that has been very explosive. Last year, first team in the history, or 24 rather, first team in the history of the NFL, 4,000 passing yards, 3,000 rushing. Last year, quarterback was hurt, which was huge, but they stunk in the red zone. What kind of offensive coordinator do they need to ensure that they get back into the postseason in 2026?
I think someone that's just going to utilize their guys in the right way, and I think that's something that, Todd Monken's able to adjust to personnel. That's something that was one of his calling cards and traits, and I remember talking about that when he first came in. I said, hey, he adapts to the personnel he's given, and he has, and he's able to make it work. But I think you have to kind of take that a step further this time and talk about some of who do the Ravens need on the field on this play or on this play, certain situations. And that's something that, I think that Monken struggled with at times. Harbaugh struggled with it at times, obviously, as well. It's someone who has a feel for the game. And while I think, I'm not saying that Harbaugh and Monken didn't have any feel for the game, but, it's something that when Derrick Henry gets taken off of the field, you're like, all right, what are we doing here? It's someone along those lines. And there are a lot of different ways that they could go with that. I mean, obviously a younger guy that hasn't had play calling experience, maybe a vet who does. We've heard a couple of names so far, a couple of requests for interviews, but I think that with the way this is going and, the head coaching opportunities and whatnot, not all of these head coaching candidates are going to get head coaching jobs. And so, the Ravens interviewed a lot of people for the head coaching vacancy, but the big thing was that they were also interviewing them, at least some of them, for coordinator spots. Offensive coordinator was a big one that was reported. So I think that for now, Baltimore, they have talent on the offensive side of the ball. It's just a matter of getting a guy in there, put those guys in the field consistently in the best spots to make the plays. And I think that while Todd Monken was good at that, it wasn't as good as I thought it would be. So hopefully finding the next guy to do that is a big priority step for me.
Now, Kevin, you mentioned the turnover on the coaching staff, and a lot of the John Harbaugh coaches have moved on or will move on to other destinations. Where does T. Martin possibly fit in? Had a relationship with Lamar Jackson, has been here for a couple of seasons. I mean, will he get a fair opportunity to show that he can take his game to the next level? He was a coordinator at USC one year, and things didn't exactly work out all that great, but he does have number 8's ear to some level.
Yeah, I would hope so. I would hope he gets an opportunity, at least to interview for the offensive coordinator spot. Of course, if it's just he stays in his role right now, I'd be totally fine with that as well. I think that, like you mentioned, T. Martin and Lamar, they have that relationship, and I think that's really important. I think he went on, I can't remember where it was, but said he was, maybe waiting on opportunities. Maybe that could be with the Ravens, could be with the Giants, with John Harbaugh, obviously. But it seems like the reports indicate that, if Todd Monken is not offered the Cleveland head coaching job, he's going to go and take the Giants offensive coordinator position. I'm not sure if T. Martin would go to New York to be the quarterback coach. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. But, I think that, T's someone that is an important part of that offensive coaching staff. And again, it's also going to be up to Jesse Minter, where I think Baltimore might retain a couple of coaches, as we've kind of seen, but it's going to be Jesse Minter's staff. And if he has a name in mind for that quarterback coach spot or, someone along those lines, then I think he should be able to bring that guy in. And maybe it's T, maybe it's not. But I do think the relationship that T and Lamar have is important and, definitely should be considered when it comes to, what this staff is going to look like moving forward.
So how about, how this potential OC hire will, I guess, impact free agency decisions in a couple months? Mainly a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. And I saw he did that interview with Kay Adams earlier this week, said he'd love to be back, wanted to be more involved in the offense, but wasn't necessarily pissed off that he didn't have the ball coming his way. He kind of understood it. And he even said, I would understand with a new OC coming in if they don't want me sticking around. Would you think that they'd prioritize keeping him? Or really, I mean, are they in position to make any changes to their wide receiver room?
Yeah, I would hope that they do. I don't think it'd be a very expensive contract. Honestly, if they gave him the deal that he got last year, 1 year, $5 or $6 million deal, honestly, I think it'd probably be a little less than that this season. I think that he's perfect as a wide receiver 3 for you. And, whether you have Bateman as your 2 or you go out and get somebody, I don't know. But I think with the new offensive coordinator, and you mentioned, Hopkins kind of made that point of, like, not every offensive coordinator is going to want a veteran receiver on their team or something along those lines. And I was just kind of like, wait, why not? Like, that's really, it's an important position to have. It's an important guy to have in that receiver room. And I think that, yes, he was definitely underutilized. And I agree with him where I don't think it makes him a bad teammate or anything to feel that way. He's a competitor. And, I think that when he had his number called, he stepped up. I mean, he did. And while I think that, there was probably more room to utilize him, Baltimore in a new offensive system, like, I'm curious to see how Rashad Bateman looks in a new offensive system. I'd be curious to see how DeAndre Hopkins looks as well. Now, I'm not saying you run the team completely back just because you get a new system or whatnot, but I think Hopkins is someone that, can make that level of an impact. And again, you're not bringing him in to be an 100-catch, 1,000-yard, 10-touchdown guy. It is just to make certain spot plays and be there in the moment and come up with a big catch. But I think that the way that we saw him perform, he definitely earned a bigger opportunity. We'll see if he stays or goes. I know he didn't necessarily shut the door on the possibility, but, didn't say, this is 100% what's happening. I think that Hopkins would be a really big addition, especially because we know the relationship that he and Lamar have together. And I think that's really important, especially as you kind of usher in this new era of coaching. And with that's going to come decent roster turnover, I think. So if Hopkins stays for another year, I think it benefits everybody, to be honest.
Now, how about the biggest pending free agent for the Ravens, Tyler Linderbaum? Now, there's no doubt in my mind that they'll prioritize trying to get a deal done with him over really anybody else that they've got set to hit the open market. But how far can they go financially? Your top center contract in the league is Creed Humphrey at $18 a year. Eagles Cam Jurgens at $17 a year. I mean, how far do you see them being willing to push this? Or could they go 19 for Linderbaum? I mean, once this starts getting towards 20, do they back out and just say it's better to financially replace him altogether?
Right. One of the big reasons that Baltimore, in fact, it was probably the main reason that Baltimore decided not to accept his or exercise his fifth-year option was because of the fact that fifth-year option number would have completely reset the center market and would have given the Ravens issues. The whole league would have had issues. It was the strategic decision to decline that option, but obviously with the notion that you're going to get him under contract long term for a lesser average annual value than that fifth-year option was, which was over $20 million. I think it was 22 or 23 or something along those lines. But it's so important for them to bring back Linderbaum. You're already looking at both your guard spots, probably, I'm assuming, looking different next year. Ronnie Stanley is not getting any younger, and you're going to have to figure that out. So with Linderbaum, I mean, he's a mainstay, someone who is really good at what he does, one of the best centers in the NFL. And, I would dip a little bit into that $20 million range. I think he's that important to them. You don't want to necessarily have to rebuild the entire interior of your offensive line. And I think that's a pretty bad spot to be in if you're Baltimore right now. Look, and obviously it's needed to some extent, but, it's needed for the guys that didn't perform well. And for Linderbaum, he was asked to play next to two guys who weren't playing well and still held his own. He's super important to what they do. And I think, to me, you want to wrap this thing up before free agency starts, because if he hits the open market, it's kind of like what we talked about Ronnie Stanley last year, and there were teams like the Patriots and the Chiefs that were, instead of bringing him in, I mean, if you don't get that deal done before free agency and he hits free agency, teams are going to start people are going to start throwing money at Tyler Linderbaum, and that's going to increase the price even more. So obviously Lamar's priority number one. You want to get that extension done to free up money and whatnot, but getting Linderbaum under contract, that is a close second.